Several years into my career, I was speaking at a Goldman Sachs sponsored conference on Wall Street. And a few minutes into my presentation, a senior executive in the front row was passed out, drooling, sleeping, apparently exhausted, or didn't find my presentation that fascinating. Regardless, after the presentation, I said, "Hey, bud, are you okay? You didn't seem that engaged." And he dismissively and nonchalantly said, federal prison. I don't know anyone that's been to jail. How was the presentation? I don't know. I was tuned out. It's not going to be a part of my life. No offense. I take no offense because in some ways I can relate to that executive never thinking that he could someday end up in federal prison. I probably would have felt that way at some point because I didn't know anyone that went to prison. And I presume to a degree, Elizabeth Holmes felt that way when she began her career at 19 after dropping out of Stanford and forayed into the world of not just raising money, but looking to change the world and taking the accolades that come with changing the world. Yet while she wanted the accolades, many would argue the responsibility to deliver and follow through and be held accountable wasn't something that it was a part of her vernacular, so to speak. And I share this because CEOs, those who are at the top, and as I'll get into in this Walgreens blog, in a Theranos trial, and this Walgreens executive that testified, the defense is continuing to take the approach that of blaming other people. That as the CEO, Holmes wasn't responsible for what everyone did. It's the same reason no CEO went to prison in the mortgage meltdown. Think back to 8, 9, 10, and 11 in this country where the economy was crashing and us taxpayers bailed out banks. Did you see any of those CEOs going to prison? No, but many of the minions, the day-to-day employees, went to prison for processing illegal loans or other things. I'm not excusing the conduct if people did wrong and went to prison. Indeed, many of them are our clients. But the CEOs didn't go to prison. And Miss Holmes' lawyers are trying to take the same argument and approach here, namely that she can't be responsible for everything that's happening beneath her. And anything that did go wrong was at the conduct of other people. So certainly there's a two-tiered system of justice that exists in this country with the criminal justice system, and it's part of the reason so few CEOs go to prison. In part, also, the government doesn't want to try a lot of these CEOs because of the resources and the time, and the CEOs tend to fight, as we're seeing with Elizabeth Holmes. They prefer the low-hanging fruit, the person making $80,000 a year with a wife and 3 children who fudged on some loan applications. It's a slam dunk plea agreement. You're going to a minimum security camp for 18 months. So as we transition into screen share, and by the way, before we get into that, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe and comment if you find value. And if you're listening to our podcast, rolling through traffic, as I like to say, thank you. I'm going to be heading out of here in a few minutes to go see my wonderful mom in Los Angeles. But I wanted to knock this video out before I go. So let's get into this screen share. So in our 9th update, we know that Walgreens is coming to the stand, and the government brought in a witness to testify to the relationship between Walgreens and Theranos, and specifically what Balwani and Holmes told them. As we know, the defense is continuing to try to distance Elizabeth Holmes from any day-to-day involvement, not just in the business, in the overall business, but also with Walgreens, because apparently she was busy on going on the cover of magazines and other places. So they are pursuing the CEO approach, too busy, not involved in the day-to-day stuff. The minions do that. The government called Nimesh Jhaveri, who oversaw Walgreens Health Services Division, worked for Walgreens for a really long time, 30 years. He told the jury, convincingly I've heard, that he only met with Elizabeth Holmes maybe 2 or 3 times at most. He testified that he worked directly with Holmes' partner and boyfriend, Sonny Balwani, whose trial is next year. So this is something that the defense has paid a whole lot of money to focus on. They'll question about this. In the closing, they'll discuss this by reiterating, isn't it true you only met with Ms. Holmes 2 or 3 times at most? That doesn't change that in that 2 or 3 times she might not have made misrepresentations or lied. There was one big mistake I made in my career, one meeting for 30 minutes that sent my dumb ass to jail and embarrassed my family and created victims and put my life off the rails for many, many years. I don't care if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 100 times. All it takes is one time, one email, one text, one message, an ability to say no, a desire to please or close a deal, the inability to say no to a boss for fear of ostracism or getting demoted. All it takes is one time, yet you can expect them to say 2 or 3 times at most, how could she have done anything wrong? We'll try to slow down my talking. I know I go fast. I get excited here. I've received a few positive comments, but some say, hey man, slow down. I'm going to do my best. Thank you for Thank you for bearing with me. On one specific occasion, Jhaveri gave Holmes and Balwani a short tour of a Walgreens store, redesigned to pilot Walgreens' planned expansion of healthcare offerings at its pharmacies. Walgreens had a significant expansion, he said, that included Theranos centers in 2,500 stores nationwide. Forgive me, we have a typo here. It says 25,000. Think about how well Balwani and Holmes sold this vision. Walgreens, a billion-dollar conglomerate with shareholders and employees who I'm sure would love a raise, yet in the interest of patients, Walgreens, to their credit, wanted to make an investment, believed this would be better for their patients, allocated their precious dollars in this direction because Balwani and Holmes sold them properly, and they went all in. Eventually, Jhaveri told the jury that Walgreens was disappointed with the high percentage of patients getting regular venous blood draws instead of a finger prick. On cross-examination, Holmes's team focused on internal memos showing that Walgreens patients did not complain about these blood draws. Just because someone didn't complain or didn't know to complain, maybe they're busy with their wife and their kids. Maybe they're working 3 jobs. Maybe they're trusting in the people. Maybe they just presume this is the way the process works and they didn't know to complain. Again, the defense is supposed to do it, but it's a total disregard and disrespect for the victims, for the patients turned victims. And until Ms. Holmes gets her arms around that and says, I'm sorry, the vitriol and enmity that comes her way will continue. Of that, I'm sure. Prosecutors supplemented Jhaveri's testimony with text messages between Holmes and Balwani about Walgreens. Those text messages, by the way, are damning, because you can't undo them and very easy to interpret. Unbeknownst to many investors and business partners, Balwani and Holmes were also romantically involved for many years. Between March 15 and October 15, Balwani and Holmes discussed their concerns about upcoming contract negotiations with Walgreens and other pharmacies. Also around that time, the Wall Street Journal, as we know, began publishing articles disclosing that Theranos' technology was unreliable. It didn't work. The company regularly used commercial third-party blood analyzers instead of its own devices. Okay, continuing on, Balwani began to send text to Holmes that essentially said, Walgreens is freaking out, lack of transparency. Jhaveri read that text in October 15, referring to Walgreens' reaction to the Wall Street Journal reports. Balwani said in his text message that Walgreens was unhappy to hear about it, was unhappy to hear things about Theranos from the company directly and not in the Wall Street Journal. Balwani then said, I told him we were surprised by the article as much as them. Walgreens' initial plans called for 500 Theranos wellness centers and Walgreens pharmacies in the fiscal year 2015. That number dropped to 200 after Jhaveri said Walgreens faced incredibly high costs in redesigning its stores to add these centers, and Theranos continually failed to meet performance benchmarks. They did continue to raise money, and she did continue to go on the cover of magazines. They didn't want to invest the time or money to do it correctly. Yet when things stalled and failed, they did invest the time to raise more money, claiming they would this time do it correctly. Just failed leadership from top to bottom. Again, not thinking through the consequences of their actions and how I opened, never considering that this someday would become civil, let alone criminal, and end up in federal prison. Too many executives, including me at one time, thought the same way, and including that executive who was drooling 4 months into my presentation at Goldman Sachs. According to email records, Jhaveri told Balwani in August 2014 that Theranos remained an essential part of Walgreens' goal of becoming a healthcare provider. So even then, in August 14, Jhaveri at Walgreens was still convinced, was still a buyer, wanted to find a way to make this work. However, he said the patient experience had to improve. The number of patients having blood drawn from the arm instead of a fingerprint needed to fall below 10%. Jhaveri told Balwani at the time, he also communicated on behalf of Walgreens, the patients needed to rate their experience at least a 4 in customer surveys. We need to have a documented detailed plan on both, or it will be difficult for me to convince expansion beyond Arizona, Jhaveri wrote in an email referring to the rollout. Indeed, Walgreens never expanded their stores beyond 40 pharmacies in Arizona, and there was 1 store in Northern California. Initially, Walgreens was all for the partnership, as we know, with Theranos to provide a new type of blood testing experience. Jhaveri told jurors that the promise of a blood test that could get done with less pain and require less blood was the actual magic that got Walgreens interested in a partnership, the actual magic. So that's the marketing background of Holmes and Balwani, of focusing on the pain points, the benefits for Walgreens, which in turn would benefit their patients, which in turn would generate more revenues and really help them stand out and be a leader in this new technology, all under the guise of Theranos, or Holmes saying helping clients, but in reality, it was simply a way to raise more money, to buy more time, to hopefully get it right on the backs of Walgreens shareholders and patients. When Theranos began running blood testing centers in Walgreens pharmacies, Jhaveri testified that they were disappointed in how many patients were still getting blood drawn the traditional way from an arm vein. Naturally, Balwani goes into deal-saving mode, trying to assure Walgreens that the percentage of venous draws would fall below 5%. But of course, that never happened. So as we conclude this video on tone at the top, two-tier system of justice for the CEO and the regular folk who run the actual company, I will share my thoughts that Jhaveri was a very good witness for the prosecution. He establishes Theranos' failure to meet basic requirements of this blockbuster deal with Walgreens. More significantly, for a company touting blood testing with a fingerprint, Jhaveri established that an unusually high number of tests were actually done with regular blood draws, which was not what they bargained or signed up for, and made this massive investment. When Jhaveri sought to discuss the issue with Balwani, he made excuses and blamed competitors and doctors. And as we know, Balwani's going on trial in early 22. As I roll off of this screen share, I just kind of want to close with how I opened. So few people could ever imagine that they will one day become immersed in this criminal justice system like Ms. Holmes. Therefore, they make decisions without considering how it will influence not just the rest of their life, but the people who are in their life, friends, family, colleagues, in this case, victims, people who gave them hundreds of millions of dollars. When you act with impunity and think that consequences of wrong conduct won't apply to you, and if people don't hold you accountable, and if there is no appropriate tone at the top, it's the wild, wild west. Bad things happen. Very few executives, CEOs are held accountable. Clearly, the government is looking to hold Balwani and Holmes accountable. It's rare that people go to trial. It's rare that CEOs are actually indicted or on trial. It's part of the reason we're so fascinated. And I will close by simply stating public attention, the way people feel about Ms. Holmes will change if and when she finally says, accept full responsibility for my conduct. I don't know if we'll ever get there, but I've gotten to the end of this video. I'm now going to drive to Los Angeles to take my wonderful mom, Tali, to lunch. Thank you so much for watching this video and gaining our specific insights on Elizabeth Holmes that I hope we can only provide, because everyone on our team has been to prison. We've endured it, we've learned, and we want to help ensure no one else goes through this wretched system. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.